In this video, we are going to discuss the pattern of the XAT. Now XAT, as you might be knowing, is an exam that is considered by the XLRI and other top institutes for admissions into their management studies programs. XAT is conducted by the XAMI, which conducts it at a centralized level. Now, if you're looking at the pattern of the test, so first we have to understand what the test looks like. So it is a computer-based test, meaning that it will happen in a particular slot and everybody who will be appearing for the test will be seeing the same set of questions and will be attempting the same questions. So that's basically how it works. Now, when is XAT conducted? XAT is conducted somewhere around the 1st or the 2nd Sunday of January, depending on the date on which this Sunday arises. So typically you can expect to be done with the XAT by the 10th of January or so every year. In case of the way in which XAT is conducted or the pattern of the test, there are 3 sections that are present, followed by a GK and an essay based section. So we'll have a look at the details of these sections a bit later, but for now we have 3 sections which are pertinent to the aptitude side of things, and there is one section or one area wherein you will have to answer a few questions on GK and there will be an essay that you will have to type. In terms of the marking scheme, for every correct answer, you are bound to get +1. Whereas for every answer that you mark incorrectly, you will get a penalty of 0.25 marks. Now, in case you do not attempt a certain question, then there are 2 things that might happen. So every year, they will release something which will talk about unattempted questions. So the latest way in which we are thinking about negative marking for unattempted questions is that, let's say for example, you marked 8 or you left 8 questions unattempted. You did not mark answers to 8 questions. Now beyond that, every question that you leave unattempted will invite a penalty of 1/10 of the marks. And that is basically something that is done at a section level, and every unattempted question that you have done, the marks will be deducted and then they will be distributed section wise on the basis of the weights of those sections. Now, if this sounds very complicated to you, it indeed is, and that's why it is recommended that you do not worry about the answers that you mark unattempted during the test. Because what happens is, if you mark something to avoid the unattempted negative marks, you might end up in a situation wherein you are getting -0.25 instead of the -1/8 that you would have got, or -1/10 that you would have got otherwise. So it's recommended that you do not think about this point. Just have it in mind that there are marks deducted for unattempted questions. Now, in terms of the on-screen calculator that is a part of the CAT, you will not have any such luxury when it comes to the XAT. Anywhere where you have to calculate, you will have to do it manually. There will be no on-screen calculator as a part of the XAT interface. Now, in terms of the differences compared to the CAT, what is going to happen differently at the XAT is there are going to be vocabulary based questions wherein you might have to find the synonyms or the antonyms or analogy based questions. So you might see these kind of questions at the XAT. You might also see questions that are based on critical reasoning, which would mean strengthening an argument, weakening an argument, or trying to figure out what is an analogous argument, which one will the author agree to, and so on and so forth. Now, typically these questions could be single questions. They might not really be in the form of a reading comprehension passage, but you will have a paragraph which will be followed by a question which will ask you to figure out what exactly is the argument or what exactly is the option that will strengthen or weaken a particular argument. So you have to think critically in these kind of questions. And in terms of grammar, you will see some grammar questions that are present at the XAT, wherein you might be expected to find the incorrect phrase in a particular sentence, or you might be asked to find the best way to rewrite a particular sentence. So that is basically where grammar comes into the picture. You might also see some questions based on fill in the blanks, which might be something which will have a grammatical component as well as a vocabulary component. And finally, poems are a regular feature of the XAT. So you might have a poem in the form of a reading comprehension passage, wherein there will be a poem which will be followed by maybe 2 or 3 questions, which will be based on the interpretation that you can have from the poem. In terms of the decision-making section, now this is basically what sets XAT apart from the CAT, because there is an entire section which you will not see at any other entrance tests except the XAT. The decision-making section, as we will see in detail later, consists of caselets wherein there will be some case that will be given to you on the basis of which you have to make an ethical decision or a business decision. So that is basically what the decision-making section looks like. And in terms of the quantitative ability section, you will have questions from higher order math, meaning that there might be some questions that will require you to apply your knowledge of trigonometry, statistics, or in terms of standard deviation, mean, median, mode, all those kind of things can be tested at the XAT. There might be a question or two which might expect you to apply the principles of first order, second order and third order derivatives. So again, that is something that you need to be considerate of when you are preparing for the XAT. Now, in terms of the latest XAT 2024 pattern, if you are to look at the entire test, part 1 goes on for 175 minutes, and this part A that we have here is the aptitude side of things, wherein you will have 3 sections: verbal and logical ability, decision making, and quantitative ability and data interpretation. So these are the 3 sections that are broadly present at the XAT. The number of questions that were at XAT 2024 were 26, 21 and 28 respectively, which brought the entire total number of questions to 75. Now, out of these 75 questions, typically there will be no sectional time limit that will be there for you to answer these questions, and that is why it is recommended that you spend almost 55 to 60 minutes on each section to get a balanced score. Because if you look at the cutoffs for the various institutes that come under the XAT, many of them will also expect you to have a sectional expertise, meaning that you will be expected to get a certain number of percentile or a certain amount of percentile in every section to qualify for a call. And that's why we recommend that you spend roughly 50, 55 or 60 minutes on each section and do justice to each and every section. Now, typically, because there are 75 questions and 175 minutes to answer part A, XAT is typically considered to be on the difficult side. Because if you look at it, you are taking roughly 2.5 minutes to answer each and every question, irrespective of whether you attempt it or not, right? And that's basically what makes XAT difficult. And that's why you will find the questions in XAT being of a slightly higher level of difficulty compared to the CAT. Now, in terms of what happens in part B and part C, so part B, there you will be supposed to check your keyboard to understand whether you will be able to answer the essay correctly or not, right? So you just have to type a phrase that is present as a part of the keyboard check, and for 5 minutes you can just type and see if all the keys are working or not, and then you move on to part C. Now, in part C, if you look at it, you will get 30 minutes to answer 2 categories of questions. One is the general awareness section, wherein you will have 25 questions, which will be a mix of static and current affairs, and you will have 1 mark for every correct answer, whereas any incorrect answer that you submit will not invite any negative marking. So general knowledge does not have any negative marking when it comes to the XAT. And in terms of the essay, typically what has been happening over the last couple of years is that XAT has been providing 3 alternatives to you in terms of the choice that you have to make to write an essay on it. Typically, you have to write a 250-ish word essay in the given amount of time. Maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs is what you can split your essay into, and that should be good enough. Now, when it comes to calculating the percentile of the XAT, one thing that is going to happen is your part A scores are going to be considered while coming up with your overall XAT percentile. Now, irrespective of your performance in general awareness, or whatever percentile you might be getting in terms of the general awareness section, that will not really be a part of your overall XAT percentile, and that's why this is something that is over and above your XAT percentile that you are going to get. Similarly, in terms of the essay does not have any released objective marking scheme, and that is why your performance of the essay will be relevant if you go for the interview specifically in XLRI, right? So that's basically where the essay bit comes into the picture, and that's how this entire XAT 24 pattern works. Now, in terms of the syllabus for the XAT, the verbal and logical ability, if you look at this particular section and the split of the latest section that appeared, you will see all the kinds of questions that appear at this particular section. Now, we can have a look at grammatically correct sentence, grammatically incorrect sentence. So, there were some 3 questions that were based on grammatically correct / incorrect sentences. There were some questions based on fill in the blanks. You also had some questions on jumbled paragraphs. But unlike at the CAT, you will have options for these jumbled paragraphs. So if you were to unscramble a paragraph, you will be helped in terms of the options, which will lead you to the correct answer in most cases. Then if you look at critical reasoning based questions, there were 3 of them. So these were based on strengthening the argument, weakening the argument, finding an analogous argument, and so on and so forth. Similarly, if you look at summary based questions, there was 1 question that was based on summary of a paragraph that was given to you. In terms of the reading comprehension passages that we had, so this year we had 3 passages that had 3 questions each and 3 passages that had 2 questions each, meaning that there was a grand total of 15 questions that was based on reading comprehension. And that basically completed the entire section, out of which you saw that the 6th passage that I have written here was a poem, A Missing Person by Jayanta Mahapatra, that was the source from where the poem was picked, and there were a couple of questions that were based on interpretations of that poem, right? And that's basically what the verbal and logical ability section looks like. In terms of the next section, that is the decision making section, there were 7 case studies with 3 questions each as a part of this year's XAT. And if you look at the kind of questions or the kind of passages that are there, there will be some passages or some questions or some sets that will expect you to deal with an ethical dilemma, whereas there will be some passages or some sets that will expect you to deal with business decision making. Now, when it comes to ethical dilemmas, you have to keep every spectator or every stakeholder in mind when you make a decision. Whereas in terms of business decisions, you are thinking about maintaining or increasing the profitability of a particular venture. So you have to read the question stem very carefully if you are to answer these questions to the best of your abilities. Now, the level of difficulty in terms of this section is generally moderate to difficult, purely because there might be multiple options that might sound like reasonably proper explanations or reasonably proper responses to a particular dilemma. And that's what makes this section a bit more difficult. And the novelty factor is also there because this section is not a part of any other entrance test. So you have to prepare for XAT specifically for the decision making section, and also this is on the moderate to difficult side. In terms of the quantitative ability section, this is where things become similar to what would have happened at the CAT, except a few questions which are based on statistics and which are based on trigonometry and so on. Otherwise, you should be fine in terms of the quantitative ability section of the XAT if you would have prepared for the CAT. In terms of the split, this year specifically, we saw a very even split across the 5 areas that were there. So in terms of algebra, there were 5 questions that were there out of the 15 questions in QA. So that was the majority in terms of the area that contributed to the questions, followed by modern math and geometry, which had 3 questions each, followed by arithmetic and numbers, which had 2 questions each. In terms of the data interpretation part, this year we had 13 questions from the data interpretation part, and there were sets that were present wherein you had 5 sets with 3, 3, 3, 2 and 2 questions, which added to a total of 13 questions from the data interpretation part. Now, typically these passages or these sets that we have in case of data interpretation are easy to moderate in nature. So if you look at the split, all the 13 questions were either easy or moderate in nature, and if you would have attempted these questions, it would have boosted your score by a lot. So overall, there were 28 questions in the quantitative ability and the data interpretation section when it came to the XAT. Finally, in terms of the general knowledge and essay bit, typically there are 25 GK questions which are evenly split between current affairs questions and static GK questions. Typically, last 1 year or 2 years of GK is good enough for you to deal with these question types, and out of 25 questions, you can attempt all of them because there is no negative marking as such. But typically, if you are somewhere in the double digit mark, it's considered to be a decent percentile at the general knowledge section as well. Just to reiterate, your performance on the general knowledge section and the essay section is not going to impact your overall XAT percentile in any manner. So make sure that you're attempting these for the sake of completion, for sure, yes. But then again, don't be worried of the marks that you're going to get at the GK questions. Similarly, in terms of the essay writing task, this year there were 3 alternatives that were given to you in terms of the titles of the passages or the essays that you were supposed to write, and out of these 3 you had to choose one and write a 250-ish word kind of an essay on these topics. So the topics you can see on your screen. So tech prediction often fails not because of wrong models or lack of imagination, but due to a lack of humility in admitting uncertainty about the future. So that was one topic that was given to you, and there were a couple more topics. So stringent restrictions on social media is crucial. So that is one bit that was asked, and things which matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. So again, sort of an abstract topic that was given to you in terms of writing the essay. Typically, what is going to happen is at least one topic will be present at the or among the choices that would have been given to you, on which you will be able to write an essay. Just ensure that you are writing the essay in the form of paragraphs. You will have to write it in the form of an introductory paragraph. Maybe if you are strengthening the argument that has been given, then paragraph 2 will be the first argument for the particular topic. Paragraph 2 will be the second argument in favor of the particular topic, followed by the last paragraph, which will be the concluding paragraph. So typically 4 or 5 paragraphs are good enough. 250-ish words is what is expected from you, and it is again possible to do so in the 20 or 25 minutes that you will be attempting this part of the entire XAT. So that was more or less the overview of the XAT, the pattern of the test, when is it conducted, and all the things that you need to take care of if you're preparing for the XAT. Wish you all the best with your preparation.